Welcome back, everyone, to Real Estate Junkies of the DMV. This is episode 15. I can't believe that we have this many episodes. And with us today, we have a special guest, Delegate Marcus Simon.
Hey, Karen, how are
Hey,
you?
Marcus. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, happy
So,
to be here with the real estate junkies. I feel like I'm welcome here. I found my people, right? I mean, that's
yeah.
I, real estate. And it's nice when the real estate nerds, real estate geeks, or whatever. I think junkies is probably the better way to put it. So
Oh,
happy to
yeah.
be here
Yeah.
talking real estate with you guys.
Yes. And I'm so glad you could join us. And one of the reasons I thought, Marcus would be such a great guest. One, you're a great speaker. I always enjoy listening to you speak. But
Karen, I've already
two,
agreed to be on. You don't have to keep buttering me up. It's fine. I'm here.
yeah. But for our listeners, Marcus Simon is a delegate to the House of Virginia Delegates. So Virginia in the General Assembly, we have two houses. And so he's, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but he's in the House and then we have the Senate. And Marcus, how long have you been serving as a delegate?
So we just started last week my 12th legislative session. So I was first elected in 2013. We do the odd year elections in Virginia. So I started serving in 2014. And so now we are in 2025, which is 11 years later. It's the beginning of my 12th session. So I'll be done with 12 at the end of this year.
Wow. Wow. So lots of experience here. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's been interesting. I still feel like a newbie sometimes, but after over a decade of coming down here, I've accumulated some seniority, and a member of the majority party now. So, it allows me some opportunity to do some things. I chair the housing subcommittee. Speaking of real estate,
Mhm.
we have a housing subcommittee of the general laws, which is my domain now. I'm also on the courts of justice committee. I chair the civil law sub. We just had a hearing today on a bill to shorten the eviction process for squatters and people that just take over properties without any kind of rental agreement. So,
Wow.
um, yeah, it's been 12 years, but it's been fun and it feels like I said sometimes it feels like it's like with kids. You turn around and they're like in high school or they're gone.
Yes.
I feel
Right.
like I woke up one day and all of a sudden I'm the one who's in charge, but I still feel like a newbie sometimes.
So speaking of committees that you're on, how many bills do you think this year are going to be introduced?
Well, let me back up for a little bit. So, right, I said we started
Yeah.
last week. So, 2025 is an odd-yeared session. So, in Virginia, we have a very part-time legislature, right? So, you and I are law partners in real life, and we work at the
Mhm.
same firm. And so, most of the year, I spend my time as a real estate attorney and settlement attorney and do real estate settlements and help build my business, which is Echo Title. But for 2 months a year, roughly, I come down to Richmond to do the people's business, and we have a short legislative session. So, our long sessions in Virginia are 60 days, and those are in the evening
Wow.
here. That's our long session. Our short sessions, the odd years, are 45 days long. So we just started a 45-day session. The reason we do them a little bit shorter in the odd years is because we don't have to do a budget. We adopt a biennial budget, so a 2-year
Mhm.
budget every other year. And this year, in theory, we don't have to redo the whole budget process. We're just making tweaks to the old budget. So that should save us some time and allows us to finish in 45 or 46 days as opposed to 60. So, yeah, with that though, we also have bill limits, right? So we've said to each member is limited to introducing 15 bills for the session because it's short. We don't have a lot of time. Frankly, that's ought to be enough. I mean, if anybody really needs to do that many, that too many more than that. They're probably not every idea is a great idea. Let me put it that way, right? So,
Yeah.
with 100 members of the House at 15 bills, we'll see no more than 1,500 put in, but we probably will see fewer than that because we have another phenomenon at work. So in addition to being a short session and an odd year, which is also an election year for us, right? A lot of us want to
Yep.
get home and go back and start campaigning for reelection. We have a very divided government. So we have, as I said earlier, I'm in the majority party. So Democrats control the House of Delegates by a 51-49 margin, so just the narrowest of possible margins, and the state Senate by 21-19. So it's a 2-vote margin, but again, any seat swings and it goes the other way. So
Right.
very narrow Democratic control in the House and the Senate, but we have Governor Glenn Youngkin who's a Republican who's in the governor's mansion. So he already vetoed last year when Democrats took back control of the legislature. he vetoed 215 bills or so in one session, right? So you get a pretty good idea of what he doesn't want to see passed. So there's no real point in reintroducing bills we know that have no chance of getting any Republican support. On the other hand, Republicans are not going to introduce a whole bunch of bills that they know Democrats already killed last year, in committee or without being heard. So I think that dynamic is going to constrain us a little bit. You always have a few what we call messaging bills, right? So there'll be some people that put in bills that they know have no chance of passing, so that they can send a certain message or to try and get people on the record about something. Most of what we're going to work on this session will be things that have some bipartisan support and are really designed to try and fix problems. And that's, in the real estate realm, you run into things. I started doing this when I was on the Standard Forms Committee, but you find things in your transactions that don't work the way they're supposed to, or the law leads you to an outcome that's unexpected and doesn't seem fair. And so you go back to the legislature and you try and work on a fix. So last year, for instance, I put in a bill, I think it came out of a case that you had, Karen, where we discovered that Loudoun County was suddenly trying to enforce a local disclosure requirement about airports. And you had to have known about it and read it in the zoning ordinance to know what was happening. So last year, we repealed their ability to do that. This year, we're going to have a bill that tells everybody in Virginia, like we tell them about everything, hey, you might live near an airport. You probably want to check on where the nearest airport is before you buy your house. And so we're putting in that buyer beware disclosure form that we all see.
And that's probably a good compromise, because I know the airport authorities were all hot to trot over that, and we're just really adamant about trying to push that through, because they really, and there was a huge outcry in this area about, hey, I didn't know that, I was on the flight path, and that, it's so noisy. So so that's probably a good thing, to compromise. I think another one that came to mind, Marcus, about, the law being passed was the HOA Resale Disclosure Act, as well as the condo. There had been some major changes, and then discovered, oh, by the way, there's this unintended consequence.
Well, that's why we have sessions every year, right? I mean, we got to fix our mistakes.
Right.
We do things in one year and then we come back, we got to fix them. This year I've got a bill in, which you guys will appreciate. It's a really minor tweak to that act, but it says very explicitly that real estate, or rather than HOA management companies and condo management companies, cannot require the name of the buyer before they prepare the resale disclosure package. Because what's happening is, I got some comments on our forum about this. The realtors like making up, they're putting their husband's name or their sibling's name or their cousin's name down just so they can get a package. Like, my family is so tired of owning all these properties. Which they obviously don't. And like, why make you guys play games? To do what we all think is in everybody's best interest, which is get the disclosure package early. It works for the seller because you learn what are the issues with the property. Are there going to be is there a calculation? You guys, did I miss a payment? So this happens all the time, as you know, right? Somebody thinks they're up on payments, but they've actually been behind for forever, and they're getting further behind. Or there are notices of violation. It gives you time to fix them and get them remedied by the association. I told the association people who were a little unhappy with me, I'm like, you guys want me doing this. Trust me, you want people ordering the packets ahead of time. You want them getting to work on their violations earlier in the process. And then you want to work out whether those violations are solved or not without the pressure of a deadline that's coming up in 4 days, we're going to have a closing or not. That puts too much pressure on everybody. So I think they agree with me.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I was thinking about after, you brought that up was, now that the resale packages are being paid for up front, the HOAs and the condos, they're being paid. So they're not having to chase that down. So
they don't have to make up to ask for a package if you're not trying to sell the house, right? And eventually they get paid. There was some concern that I guess not every title company is good about sending them the name of the new buyer and so forth. Process. But look, if you guys want to ask for that to get the statement of account, right? That the dues update that we get at the title company, that might be an appropriate place to ask for a name, right? Because, hey, listen, if I'm giving you the final statement of account, who is that for? Why are you asking me for that, by the way? Are you really buying the house or not? So I can see it there, but not at the beginning of the process when you're just trying to get the package.
Right. Yeah. And I think too, one of the other things talking about, fixing some consequences, or unintended consequences, is the transfer on death deed. that particular act. And I know I get a lot of calls, and, in theory, if someone has it in place, right, and then they sell the property, that should in and of itself revoke it, right? They shouldn't have to do an affirmative act, but it sounds like some clerks in some land records are requiring an additional document to say, yes, I revoke this.
Well, it's funny. We used to give folks advice about drafting contracts. If something's really important to you, say it, say what you just said, and then say why you said it again, right? And so sometimes the legislature, we have to do the same thing. We think we know what we mean when we write something down. But there's a whole state full of officials that have to interpret that and read it the same way. And county clerks of court are notorious for reading this law the way they want to, or just reading it in a way that it was hard to imagine they would. And so, and then there's other, title insurance underwriters, lawyers, everybody sort of has a different read on it. So for the transfer on death deeds, one of the things we thought was obvious is if you don't own the property anymore, you can't leave it to the person. But well, I have a bill that'll go in that'll explicitly say any transfer to a living while you're still alive automatically revokes your transfer on death deed. And then also, what's happening was clerks were trying to make you record a revocation and then charging you taxes on that and a recording fee. Get rid of that ability. On a similar note, on the e-notary statute, we put in language that says, hey, clerks, you have to accept electronically notarized documents. And then we also had some requirements that said for Virginia e-notaries, you have to do all these things. Well, the clerks were reading that to mean they only had to accept e-notarized documents from Virginia e-notaries. They didn't have to accept out-of-state e-notaries, which we didn't say that. We didn't think we said that anyway. But, people are going in other states, they're getting their deed for their Virginia property notarized. In Virginia, it used to be Virginia was the only state that had an e-notary. We were among the leaders in that. But now after the pandemic, lots of states have e-notary statutes. So we have to bring in another bill to make sure that if you send somebody off to do an e-notary and they find an e-notary that's local to them, or they go sign on for a service like notarize or proof or notary cam or whatever that uses a different state's e-notary system, that document's still recordable in Virginia. So you guys find these hiccups when you do real estate transactions or we run into a problem. And again, that's what we get. So we've done every year trying to help smooth things out.
So let's turn, Marcus, let's turn to like Virginia's budget. I thought this was really interesting, and also the unemployment, how well Virginia stacks up against the national average. And I thought it was really interesting. Some of the numbers that you provided were just, for me, just a huge eye opener to go, wow, Virginia is doing really well. So how does our unemployment average or rate or interest rate compare to the national average?
It's interesting. So I alluded to the fact earlier that in theory, right, we don't have to do a budget this year. A little air quotes there. The reason is we actually have $3.2 billion projected budget surplus in Virginia. I don't know if you guys have been following the news. Maryland right now, unfortunately, for whatever reason, has a real bad budget deficit and a real big austerity problem. But Virginia, we've been doing really well. And part of the reason we've been doing well is we've been budgeting in anticipation of this recession that was supposed to come that never came. And in the meantime, Virginia's economy has been doing really well. So like Virginia's unemployment rate is consistently growing. Well, it's growing at 1.5 to 2% per year, which is well over what the unemployment rate has been in the employment gains have been around the country. Right? So we're growing our employment base faster, and our unemployment rate is consistently between 1.5 and 2% below the rest of the U.S. So when the U.S. goes up to 4, we're usually around 2 or 2.5. When it goes down to 3, we go down to like 1.5 or 1. So we're very consistently staying spread out. Let me see.
You can share your screen now.
Let me try and throw up a quick slide for you guys here.
Okay.
If this will work. There's the slide. Let me see if I can make it bigger for you. Is it? Can you?
Yep.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah.
So there you can see that, as I was showing you, right? So the job growth has been staying well above. So these red bars are what's happening nationally. The blue line is sort of what's been happening in Virginia. We're staying about 1.6% ahead of the bars for the rest of the country. And that causes our unemployment rate, where the red line here, to stay below what the rest of the U.S. has been doing as far as unemployment, which means that jobs and wages are growing at a pretty steady pace throughout the Commonwealth. I know you're seeing more than you want to see here, but
no, it's good.
Slideshow, I don't know what you'll get, so we'll show you these slides. But the wages, jobs and wages have been growing, and the wages have been growing faster than inflation in a lot of areas. You know, we've had big growth in the construction, manufacturing, and financial activities. So, and then the other thing that's caused is, right, because of the availability of these jobs, our low unemployment rate and job growth, we've seen a net migration trend change. This is a pretty steep little check mark here, right? And so we now have more people coming into Virginia than leaving. So again, that strong economy is a magnet for folks to come to the area, all of which has led to a big increase in revenues for us. So that means that our revenues are up. So then the result of all those factors together has led to a 7.3% increase in revenue, which is much higher than we had projected when we did the budget. Most of it's driven by withholding taxes, meaning growth in wages, right? So we have, some people that get paid on a quarterly basis, or get paid on a commission basis, things about quarterly taxes. But withholding is your typical income tax is taken out of your regular weekly or biweekly or monthly paycheck as an employee, and that is where the big source of growth is coming from. So again, comparing us to the U.S. economy, now, to be clear too, the U.S. economy is growing well right now as well. We're just doing even better in Virginia. So, but as long as we're, like I said, we're staying above, when the floor goes up, we stay a little bit higher as well. And so, I like to say, because of my party, thanks Joe Biden for this great economy you're leaving us with. But at any rate, the numbers don't lie, right? We are gaining jobs. We're gaining more than the national average. And that's been helpful. It's not been a drag on Virginia. Interest rate cuts, we see them going. I know the Fed's getting a little more conservative. We may not see as many cuts next year as expected, but we certainly don't see it going up, right? So that we've topped out. We've seen the top of interest rates. They're coming down. Whether we get 2 more cuts this year, whether we get 3 more, whether we get one in the first quarter, we have to wait till June for another cut. Nobody's talking about keeping them flat or raising them anymore, right? So that's good news for rate cuts for 2025. I think the most likely scenario is that we go down 75, so 3/4 of a point. Although you can see somewhere in that 1 full point, half to full is almost all of the probability. Anything else is sort of an outlier as far as what we're likely to see. That chart makes sense. So
all to say.
All to say, so business and consumer confidence is strong in Virginia, and it's going to give us a lot of money to spend. So all to say that's what we have to fight. This gap here, it's funny, it looks like 2 lines are pretty close together, but the space between this little purple line and the green line is $3.2 billion that we get to spend.
Wow.
On priorities or on reducing tax, some combination.
And where are we going to spend it?
So again, that's where the real conversation is going to be had. One of the conversations is about getting rid of the car tax, right? And folks have been in Virginia for long enough. In 1998, 20 some years ago, Governor Gilmore campaigned on eliminating the car tax, and yet it's still there. What the governor's proposing as far as car tax, he's not proposing getting rid of it. He's proposing creating a tax credit for working class families. So if you have you make under $100,000 a year as a married couple, right? I know there's a lot of people in Virginia that a couple makes less than $100,000, but if you do, you can get a $300 tax credit to offset whatever car tax you pay. So if you have a fairly modest car and you only pay about $300 a year in car tax, you make under $100,000, you could have the state essentially pay the car tax for you in the form of a tax credit. If you make under $50,000 a year, you can get a $150 tax credit for an individual. So we're going to help offset the car tax. That's one of the things. But we'll see if that's what we end up doing, right? There's a whole bunch of taxes that we could look at. There may be other ways to achieve the same relief. There could be a rebate. It is an election year after all. Sometimes what we've done with these things, problem with using surplus funds that may not recur every year to do permanent tax cuts is that you build in a structural potential for a deficit. We're not allowed to have a deficit in Virginia. And so sometimes we get nervous about doing a permanent tax cut with one-time surplus revenue. And so you could see something like a one-time tax rebate of $300 to everybody, or $250 to everybody instead of $300 to just car owners, as another way of giving some of that money back to the taxpayers. I don't think there's any doubt there's going to be some form of tax relief, right? When you collect $3.2 billion more than you thought you needed of taxpayer money, it's hard to tell the taxpayers you can't have any of that back. That said, we also have some unfunded needs in education and in other areas. And so you really have a surplus if you were shortchanging some of your basic responsibilities, right? Like if you haven't paid your mortgage yet, you may have a big bank balance in your bank, but you're not really rich, right? Because that mortgage bill is coming due at the end of the month. And so we just need to be careful we're not doing, we're not spending money that should be committed to important needs as well.
You mentioned.
I hope I don't sound too much like a politician when I say that.
No. No, but it is good to keep in perspective because you look at that and that's a lot of money. It's a lot of zeros, and certainly you think, hey, yeah, we could do a lot, although things are expensive, so it could get eaten up real quick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, building the road. I mean, so one of the things you can do also with one-time money like that is you can spend, you can pay down, just like with your mortgage, right? You can pay down your mortgage, so you can pay down some of your debt or some of your bonds with that money, and then that's interest saved forever, right? So you can take that one-time savings, and by paying down debt, you actually generate recurring savings year after year after year because you've got less debt service, and that frees up more money for programs and things like that. So there are a number of ways to do that, and I'm sure we'll be looking at a bunch of them.
Awesome. Patricia, do you have any questions, anything that you want to ask Marcus about?
I have something that popped in my head and it's controversial, so I probably shouldn't, although we could probably
you can always edit it out, right? Let's see.
Natalie
That's the beauty of editing. Yes.
Get it out. No, I just, one of the things I'm just curious about, and I don't even know if this is a state issue or a federal issue, just thinking about the real estate market as a whole and what the legislature can do to help, like high rents, for example.
So we do actually, so we've got a number of bills that'll be proposed, and it's hard to know what will come out of this. There are some what we call anti-rent gouging bills, right? And so there are some proposals to limit when you have a corporate landlord who owns a building that he hasn't made any improvements to, or she hasn't made any improvements to in any years and hasn't done anything to it, and starts raising the rent without any obvious cost increases to that landlord, but just because they can. There's some talk about capping a percentage cap on those landlords. The problem always is in where you draw the line, right? Because there are big corporate landlords that may be owned by private equity or whatever that are gouging people for rent, but you want the same rules, right? We control those folks. At the same time, you've got somebody who's, instead of investing in the stock market or an IRA, they've accumulated 2 or 3 rental properties, and their costs are going up, and we want to be able to, we don't want to limit their ability to actually use that for their retirement. So, where we draw the line on those things is always the tricky part. But yes, I think you'll see some proposals for big private equity folks and other corporate style landlords to have to at least justify, and then if they can't, to limit their rent increases. The other thing we're trying to do is increase supply. And there's a number of things we're doing to try and increase supply. I was just looking at a bill today that says when the government has surplus property that it's going to auction off. So, we had a site set aside for a school that's never been built, for instance, and the county wants to get rid of it. You have to first offer it. You have to spend like the first 180 days or 6 months of requests for proposals have to go to low-income housing providers or affordable housing providers. So that's sort of your first stop, and see if that's a suitable site for affordable housing. Let's make that the first place that the surplus government property goes. It seems like an easy no-brainer to me because that's a big need. I'm actually working on a bill to speed up the plats and plan review process at the county. So when developers want to come in and build something, their project doesn't get bogged down for years, going through lots of plan reviews, if we could consolidate some of the steps. I mean, one of the things that drives folks crazy, and if you've ever worked with a builder or developer, you know this, is they take something to the county says you need to fix this on your plat and plan and resubmit. They take it back, they fix that, they resubmit. The guy says, okay, that's fixed. Now there's 2 other problems you need to come back. It's like, no, we're actually have a bill that says, look, you've got to look at the entire application at one time and do your best to give them every deficiency you see there so that they have a chance to fix all of it, so it doesn't end up, winding its way through the process over and over again. So things like that we can do that don't sacrifice the quality of the review. And I'm not trying to say, listen, I don't want to cheapen the building code. We want people to have safe housing. There's a lot of public safety stuff in there, but sometimes just the process, you can streamline it so it goes faster. That'll one, get more stuff in the pipeline. 2, that time is money, right, for real estate developers. So if they can get their things approved faster, then that cuts their overhead, and they can pass that savings on to home buyers. So there are a number of things like that we're looking at in this legislative session. Now, I will say, to the controversial part of it, we had a number of bills like that on the landlord-tenant side come out last year that the governor's already vetoed. And there's a view of it that to the extent that we're interfering with people's individual contractual rights. Hey, look, people signed up for these deals. We shouldn't override the deals they bargained for. There's a view against some of the tenant protections that I think some of us would like to see put in place. But we'll take another stab at it and see if we can, again, find that bipartisan. We have to find compromise, or it's not going to happen this year because we've got divided government.
Right.
Is one of those bills, Marcus, have to do with the 5-day pay or quit?
Yeah. Well, this is one that was we'll hear this one tomorrow probably in general. I don't know when you guys are airing this. I probably shouldn't be using things like today, tomorrow, or whatever. But yeah, there's a bill that says, look, just give us 14 days to catch up on the payment. Virginia has one of the shortest notices before you can evict somebody anywhere, which is you only have to give them 5 days notice. Hey, you're behind on your rent. You have 5 days to come up with the money, or I'm going to initiate the eviction proceeding. And of course, once I initiate the eviction proceeding, now you're not only on the hook to me for the rent, but also the attorney's fees and everything else. And then it starts to snowball and makes it impossible for folks to catch up. So all we're saying is give us 14 days, like almost every other state. We did that during the pandemic, and then it expired, and we didn't re-up it. But there'll be an effort to do that. Just a little more humanity for folks on this.
Kind of like the foreclosure process, extending, because I know that process used to be really fast, and now it's been extended, so it's longer to allow time to work out, hopefully, a non-foreclosure option.
Yeah, you probably remember that from your days working in that space, but yes, Virginia used to be, again, one of the fastest, from missing a payment to being evicted in the country. But we've tried to slow that process down a little bit too.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Marcus. Thank you for coming. Thank you for taking the time. I know it's really busy right now for you, so we do appreciate it. And stay tuned, because we're going to circle back after the session is over and talk about the bills that did ultimately pass.
Well, Karen, Patricia, it's great being with you. Like I said, count me as a real estate junkie. So anytime you want me on, let me know, and I'll do my best to make time for you guys.
For sure. All right. Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks, Marcus.
Bye.
Bye.